Dumb Husky and his white cat Shizun. Chapter 311. Shi Shengpeak, the Big End. 1 month later. Vuchame Town. Let's take a look. The unorganized shouts of the peddler flowed in the sunlight. He shook the flower drum in his hand and walked through the streets carrying a bamboo pole. Night Wanderer, only 30 coins per piece. Back then, Elder Yuheng had personally created these golem to ward off evil and suppress disasters. No lies. You are not being deceived. Come, don't miss this opportunity. Broken straw sandals trampled across the flagstones and the shadow of the peddler was dragged long. Children ran past, laughing and holding either candied fruits or kites. Suddenly, a girl with a ponytail tugged at the corner of the hawker's clothes. "Uncle, I want to buy a night wanderer." The peddler put down his burden and picked one that was painted with peach red wood. "Hey, is this one good to look at?" The girl nodded her head, "Yes. This it is." Fearing that someone else might snatch it away, she hurriedly grabbed the golem that was as tall as her and fished out the copper coins from her pocket with great difficulty. She was missing 3 copper coins. The girl became a little anxious. "Aya, I ran too fast, did it fall out on the way?" She turned it over again, her patched bottom turned up. Still only 27 coins. The little girl panicked, her eyes became red. "Big brother, I've lost it? It's just a small difference. Can you just sell them to me like this?" He rubbed his dirty hands together. "Little girl, I already spent 25 coins on this night traveler. If I were to give it to you, wouldn't I only earn 2 coins? After a day of walking, it's not even enough to pay for a meal. Then what should we do?" The girl began to wipe away her tears. "When I go home, Dad is going to scold me again, wah." Just as she was crying loudly, someone suddenly walked over and blocked the sunlight behind the girl. "Young man, you can have the silver piece for it." A gentle and refined voice rang out, causing the girl to blankly raise her head. First, she saw a hand wearing a snow silk bracelet, then her eyes moved up and met the pair of jade-like eyes. Mei Hangxiu gently smiled and said, "This little girl is so beautiful. How can you let her shed tears for 3 pieces of coins?" "Ah." The girl was stunned. Mei Hangxiu crouched down and tried his best to be on the same level as her. Then, he handed over the night wanderer that had just been taken away by the hawker into her arms, his eyebrows furrowed as he said, "It's hard to buy a beauty's tears with 1,000 gold coins. Girls' tears are the most valuable thing in the world. Next time, don't cry over such a small matter." Next to him walked another man with a similar face and a straw hat came. His eyes were very pretty, emerald in color, but they were as cold as jade. At first glance, they didn't seem warm at all. The man frowned and said, "Are you done? She looks to be 5 or 6 years old only." Mei Hangxiu laughed and stood up. "Brother, you are so boring. When it comes to beauty, age had nothing to do with it. Old women up to the age of 80, children up to the age of 5, fat and thin, each have their own good looks, you have to learn to praise them. Only this way would." "Hey, why did you run away?" His big brother, Mei Hangxiu, did not even want to bother with him and turned to leave. This time, the Mei brothers went to the capital under the orders of the palace master of the Kunlun Palace, Mingyulo, to congratulate the people of Shu on the restoration of Shi Shengpeak. It was fortunate that Madame Wang had protected the people of the sect back then. Now that the calamity had subsided, the elders and disciples were all fine, their strength was still preserved. As a result, in the cultivation world that had been reshuffled, Shi Shengpeak was actually ranked in the top 3. "Young Master Mei, the sect leader is waiting for you at the Mountain of Daggers and Sea of Flames field. This is the time for morning cultivation." The majority of disciples were practicing in the drill grounds. The Mountain of Daggers and Sea of Flames field was empty and quiet, and only a man dressed in luxurious clothing stood in front of a white jade fence with his hands clasped behind his back, looking down at the misty red clouds that surrounded the mountain peak. Mei Hangxiu and his brother walked over. Their feet made a rustling sound as they stepped on the newly grown grass. Hearing the commotion, the man did not turn around but sighed, "You're here." "I'm here. I've been waiting a long time for you." Mei Hangxiu couldn't help but laugh out loud. "Zimming, why are you saying such things?" He was still handsome to the point where he had an almost extravagant appearance, though his face still had the immaturity of youth. As he looked at the Mei brothers, the tension between his brows collapsed slightly, and his eyes revealed a trace of the blankness and naivete of the past. You both don't know, I've been really tired these past few days." When Xuemeng saw that there was no one around and the Mei brothers did not bring anyone with them, he immediately relaxed and let out a long sigh. "Elder Suanji has reminded me of the rules and etiquette 17 or 18 times a day. I've never learned this before. I couldn't even speak the way I want. I can only open my mouth and say 2 words. Elder Suanji told me that this is called being precise and concise." Mei Hangxiu could not help but cover his mouth with his hand. Cough, cough. Xuemeng glanced at them and said somewhat impatiently, "If you want to laugh, then laugh. Stop pretending to cough." The elegant young master, Mei Hangxiu, replied, "No, no. How can we make fun of sect leader Xue? Don't you dare call me that. I've had enough." Still as calm as ever, the elder Mei Hangxiu said, "Bear with it. From today onwards, you'll have to endure it for the rest of your life." Xuemeng simply turned his head to look at the clouds at the peak of the mountain. "You've really done it now. These are the most depressing words I've heard since the succession ceremony." "Mei Hangxiu," Xuemeng added, "there is no one." Ha ha ha. This time, Mei Hangxiu really did clap his hands and laugh. After a moment of laughter, he said to Xuemeng, "Actually, there aren't that many rules for the sect leader to observe, right? Look at Gai Yuye's Jiangxi, he lives a lot more comfortably. It would have been better if this was not mentioned." As soon as it was mentioned, Xuemeng's originally relaxed back tensed up again. In a place that others couldn't see, under the luxurious sleeves embroidered with golden threads, his 10 fingers couldn't help but tighten, and his heart was extremely unsatisfied. Actually, he had just gone to Gai Yuye a few days ago. Jiangxi had been severely injured in the catastrophe, but it was fortunate that there were many miraculous pills and medicines in his sect. Furthermore, his disciples were all people who were well versed in healing, so it wasn't that hard to save his life. However, although his life was saved, his health was no longer the same as before. What was even more worrisome was that Jiangxi's body had undergone some changes after being affected by the demonic energy. What happened? At that time, Xuemeng was standing outside of Jiangxi's room and asking an elder of the Gai Yuye who was attending the sect leader. The elder replied, "I don't know. The door to the demon realm has not been opened for thousands of years, so there are no records of cultivators being infected with devil energy. For now, it seems like the sect leader is fine, but I'm not sure what kind of effect it will have on him in the future." Xuemeng's gaze was gloomy as he glanced inside the room once more. The jade-colored curtains were layered over and over again, covering the entrance. Not to mention Jiangxi's current appearance, even the layout of the bedroom of sect leader Gai Yuye was unclear from the outside. "Can you cure it?" The elder shook his head. "I'm afraid it will be very difficult." The anxiety in his heart grew more distinct. Closing his eyes, he said, "If you need anything, you can come find me at the Shisheng Peak at any time." Although the elder didn't know exactly what's going on between Xuemeng and Jiangxi, he vaguely felt that the relationship between the two was quite close. Thus, he politely bowed and said, "If that's the case, then let me give thanks to sect leader Xue in advance." Xuemeng waved his hand and once again cast his gaze towards that deep curtain. Actually, he really wanted to go in and take a look at Jiangxi, but the place where a sect leader would sleep in was even more mysterious and private than his room. What's more, Jiangxi was still unconscious, so the rest of Gai Yuye's disciple could not allow him in. Xuemeng did not know what else to add and said with a frown, "Sect leader Jiang Suihuang, I have already sent it back to your sect's elder Feng Jian. Remember to tell him." "Yes." After a pause, he saw that Xuemeng was hesitating to speak, so he asked, "May I ask if sect leader Xue has any other orders?" "Forget it, it's fine. I'm leaving." The elder was very polite. "Many thanks to sect leader Xue for coming here personally." Although Xuemeng had disagreements with Jiangxi, that was when he was the young master. Now that he was the sect leader, Gai Yuye's people naturally wouldn't ignore him. Several elders and medical cultivators accompanied him as he walked down the large hall. Gai Yuye had spiritual energy circulating all year round the sect, so there were hundreds of flowers blooming in the clear and cold air. Xuemeng looked over and saw that although there was a light snow falling on Linling Isle, there was still a field of luscious plants and flowers blooming around. He didn't know what he was feeling in his heart. He walked slowly down the porch, the boards creaking beneath his feet. Suddenly, the beast's head at the corner of the roof rang a bell. Xuemeng raised his head and saw a young man around the corner, who looked similar to his age, walking towards him with 2 rows of sabers in hand. The youth had a handsome face and broad shoulders. In the morning light, his face exuded an indescribable sense of gentleness. Even though Xuemeng's eyes were high at the top, he still couldn't help but look at him more than a few times. "Sect leader Xue." Meeting on a narrow path, the young man stopped first and bowed. He was upright and proud. Xuemeng stopped his footsteps. "This is a close attendant of the sect leader. All these years, he has been assisting the sect leader in managing the internal affairs of Gai Yuye, and although he has not been showing his face very often, the sect leader still places a lot of importance on him." The elder smiled. It was obvious that he was wary of this young man. Xuemeng indifferently answered with an N. The youth saluted. Seeing that the other person was still staring at him, he raised his head and smiled. At this distance, the moment he raised his head, Xuemeng could clearly see him. Although Xuemeng never paid too much attention to the appearances of others, he still noticed the youth's outstanding appearance. Especially his pair of eyes, which were bright and gentle, as if they were lit up by countless stars. What a memorable face! Xuemeng narrowed his eyes and began to size up the other party's appearance even more harshly. He even tried to find some flaws to compare him to. However, after looking back and forth a few times, he was still unable to find anything. He was astonishingly handsome. He was young, reserved, gentle in appearance, tall in stature, and his skin was very delicate. He even seemed to be emitting a faint glow. Such a young man should be listed on the cultivation world's young elites list, instead of being squeezed, working as an attendant in the depths of Gai Yuye's heart. Xuemeng thought dryly. A bright pearl covered in dust, Zhang Yuchen was truly not a good person. Being stared at by Xuemeng without blinking, the young man felt somewhat uncomfortable. However, he still asked politely and gently, "Sect leader Xue, is something the matter?" Xuemeng came back to his senses. "No, it's nothing." But he continued to stare at him unabashedly. Being close to the sect leader, although highly regarded but didn't have any status. If Xuemeng didn't ask, the other party wouldn't tell him his name and humiliate himself. The sect elder was rather tactful. Seeing that Xuemeng was curious about this young man, he introduced him with a smile, "Don't look at his age, sect leader Xue's." He was indeed actually very young. In fact, Linling Island is extremely small and his management is very outstanding. Sometimes it makes us elders very ashamed. The youth bit his lips as his face slightly blushed. He was a bit embarrassed as he replied, "Elder is too kind." Xuemeng sized him up again and became increasingly curious about this person. Suddenly, he caught a glimpse of his follower carrying a lacquered wooden tray. After a moment of thought, he asked, "Are you going to Jiangxi's room?" "Yes." The youth was slightly startled as he did not expect Xuemeng to address his sect leader directly by his name, but he quickly nodded his head with a smile. This was a good opportunity. If he expressed his desire to accompany them, the other party should not reject it. This way, he could openly enter Jiangxi's bedroom and take a look at how sick that idiot was. Xuemeng cleared his throat and was about to say something when he heard the young man's gentle voice. "I'm going to deliver the medicine to my foster father." Xuemeng was stunned at first, then his face darkened slightly. "What?" The sect elder hurriedly said, "I'm sorry, I almost forgot to mention that he is the adopted son of sect leader Zhang." Xuemeng. Several moments later, they saw several elders following behind the ashen-faced Xuemeng on the corridor of the main hall. Unsure of what had happened, they nervously said, "Eh? Sect leader Xue. Sect leader Xue, what happened to you? Is there something wrong?" The newly appointed sect leader of the Shisheng Peak had a gloomy and infernal expression on his face. His heels embedded in the solace of his iron boots began to pace up and down the stairs with a loud clanging sound. He gritted his teeth with a face as ashen as mud. Of course, he didn't care whether Jiangxi raised any little kittens or not. What did that have to do with him? He was just annoyed that Jiangxi, who clearly had a capable son in the sect, still had the hypocrisy of presenting himself as a loner in front of outsiders, which made people feel sorry for him. How shameless! How disgusting! Mei Hangxiu saw the abnormality in his facial expression and asked, "What happened to you?" "Nothing. I just suddenly thought of a completely unrelated person." He didn't want to talk about Jiangxi any longer, so he changed the topic and chatted for a while. Then, together with the Mei brothers, he went to the ancestral hall of Shisheng Peak to light incense for the heroes of the sect who had passed away. As they entered the ancestral hall, Mei Hangxiu discovered that there was a unique memorial tablet at the side of the altar. It was covered by a red handkerchief and the words could not be seen. "This is Mo Ran's tablet." Xuemeng's expression was indifferent, making it difficult to guess his thoughts. "Other people say that he is dead, but I don't think so. After the big battle that day, I saw Shizun descending Mount Kunlun. It's clear that he went somewhere, but he doesn't want to bring anyone else with him." As he spoke, he pursed his lips, his eyelashes drooping. "In short, I don't believe that he just turned into ashes like that." Xuemeng. Xuemeng turned his head away and looked at the daylight outside the door. "That bastard Mo Ran has always been doing things his own way since he was young. He doesn't follow common sense. I know it's the same this time." Mei Hangxiu couldn't help but sigh when he heard his words, but he didn't intend to refute him. The Mei brothers kowtowed to their benefactor and his wife, while Xuemeng stood to the side with his eyes closed. He did not say anything. When the ceremony was over, Mei Hangxiu stood up and patted his shoulder. "Ziming, you will be a good sect leader." Xuemeng opened his eyes and glanced at the black and white words on the memorial tablets. The incense burned and the dust drifted in the air. In the light green smoke, Xuemeng looked at his father's memorial tablet and calmly said, "It won't be any better than him. Let's go." Xuemeng waved his hand, turned around and left. In the solemn ancestral hall, the small piece of lacquer wood did not have the name of a dead person written on it according to the rules. The Mei brothers looked at each other, sighed and followed Xuemeng's footsteps. A pinch of incense ash fell. The youngsters had already gone far away, but in the dark altar there still was the lighted 3 incense sticks they had left behind. Behind the faint light, the wooden tablet was filled with Xuemeng's handwriting. "The grace of the Father is irreplaceable. Loyalty is beyond reach." And at the bottom of the tablet, there was another inscription carved with 4 words that made it hard to laugh. However, the Mei brothers knew, and Xuemeng also knew, that if Xue Zhenjiang's spirit in heaven saw these 4 words, he would laugh heartily. The lamp flickered, illuminating the elegant cursive script, which was formed by Xue Zhenjiang's calligraphy. Each stroke was an unintentional flow. Xuelang was very beautiful. That night, Shi Shengpeak was hosting a banquet to entertain the guest from Taxia Palace. Due to the close friendship between the two sects, this was considered a private banquet and was not something that could be viewed by outsiders. But even so, there were still rumors circulating around. It was rumored that the newly appointed sect leader Xue had gotten a bit drunk after drinking 3 cups of normal wine and 2 cups of light wine. Sect leader Xue liked to mutter to himself when he was drunk. That day, he had mumbled a bit too much. Sometimes he would cry for his parents, sometimes he would hate his brother, sometimes he would moan and mumble about his Shizun. Sometimes, he would call some attendant Chimei. That day, his mouth was full of their names. But none of them came, except for Mei Hangxiu. Deep in drunkenness, under the lanterns, he rested his head on his arm and looked out from the crook of his arm at Menpo Hall. For a time, he saw a lively and joyous clamor. Xue Zhenyang and Madame Wang were toasting each other, while Shi Mei and Mo Ran were wrapping dumplings around them. When the crowd quieted down and everyone turned around, they saw Elder Yuhan wearing a bright red cloak. He was shaking off the snow on his oil paper umbrella as he walked towards them. "Sect leader, you're drunk." In his ears, there was a vague sound of someone calling him, but Xue Meng did not answer. Afterwards, someone sighed and covered him with a layer of cold clothing. He didn't know who that person was, whether it was Elder Suanji, Elder Tanlang, or someone else. Afterwards, that person touched his head and said, "Young master, you're drunk." He made a vague sound, but the tears began to flow and he curled his head into his arms. It was already late in the night, the cups and plates were in a mess and his spirits were in disarray. Xue Meng did not speak anymore, nor did he pull anyone else to cry and make noise with. He was trying his best to quickly grow into his father. Perhaps in another year he would not get so easily drunk. After a few more years, even if he was drunk, he wouldn't speak nonsense again. In the end, no one would be able to easily see the tears of Xue Ziming of Shi Shengpeak anymore. Gradually, he would become a tree that supported the entire cultivation world. The years when he cried and drank to his heart's content would become the memories of the future when sect leader Xue and his juniors chatted and laughed. Every generation passed like this, and when Xue Meng passed away, the history of his generation would be brought up again, but no one would be familiar with it anymore. Those young and beautiful years might eventually casually disappear into the distance, eventually turning into a sentence on Xue Meng's folding fan: "Xuelang is very beautiful." After the Mei brothers returned to Taxia Palace, a few days later, the cultivation world announced an important matter. After the New Year's Eve, Taxia Palace of Mount Kunlun will form an alliance with Shi Shengpeak. The two sects are of the same mind that there should be no distinction between the upper and the lower cultivation world. To usher a new dawn in a peaceful world, sect leader Mingyulo and sect leader Xue Ziming have come together to watch over the world and prove their sincerity. The moment the announcement was made, waves rolled across the 1,000 layers. Some praised it, some did not understand, and some were silent. They could see that this new alliance might shake the world in the next 10, 20, or even faster years. The so-called upper cultivation world and lower cultivation world would slowly begin to blur their boundaries. Is this a good thing? Someone asked curiously in a tea house. His companion took a sip of the cold snow fragrance in the bowl and shook his head. He said, "Who knew what the future holds?" In the past, Nangong Changjing had gathered the 9 great sects to form the upper echelons of the cultivation world, and he wanted to make the places controlled by these sects become a paradise. Everyone is not paying tribute, but the result is not satisfactory. It seems that a decision is wise and correct, but it still has to be given time to be proven. Sigh, that's true. However, at least for the time being, there won't be another incident involving Gai Yuye. He shouldn't be able to beat the combined forces of Taxia Palace and Shi Shengpeak. I can't say for sure. Judging from Jiangxi's personality, he doesn't want to be subservient to others. Forget it, forget it. Why do you care so much? Let's take it one step at a time, we have to live our own lives. This snake gall is pretty good as well as the stir-fried melon seeds. The customer raised his voice and shouted towards the proprietress, "Lady boss, give me another gin." During the winter and spring months, most of the wounds in the prefecture slowly healed. The villages and towns that had been destroyed in the war were rebuilt with the help of the various large sects. There had been people who had lost faith in the darkness, but fortunately, the human heart was not immutable. Perhaps one day, the silence would erupt into a roar and the abyss would burst into sparks. Those who applaud blindly will stop, those who cringe will open their mouths, those who are gentle will be tough when the threat comes, and those who contradict will stand out in front of lies. Everything was changing. A new city was being built on the ruins. However, right and wrong could not be distinguished so clearly. However, this was nothing. A person might never be able to truly understand anything, even themselves. One of the simplest examples. You have eyes, but have you really seen your own face? Good. Let's do another part. Lin Yi's old land, under the old locust tree, a play was just completed. Grandmaster Chu is truly a good person. The old woman wiped away her tears as she listened. I wonder where he has gone to now. Grandmaster Mo is the one who is truly wronged. Sigh. A young girl smashed the candied fruits in her hands. Her eyes were sparkling black and her face was full of tears when she heard this. As she was sobbing, she suddenly turned her head towards her companion beside her and said, "Woo woo, I don't like the story of Big Brother Nangong and Big Sister yet." His companion was stunned. Why? The girl said while wiping away his tears, "They're all dead." The boy muttered, "It's not like Ye Wangzi is dead." The girl cried even more miserably. You don't understand. All of you boys are stupid. She must be feeling worse than death. Will you? The boy was at a loss for what to do as she continued crying. He scratched his head for a long time before saying, "Ai, don't cry anymore. How about this, have we come here to play? I'll be Nangong Si, you can be Ye Wangzi, and we'll make up our own stories." Aya, don't cry, don't cry. In order to please his friend, the boy picked a palm-sized leaf to cover half of the little girl's face. Then, cover your face. We're here to get married. The little girl blinked her eyes and then burst out laughing. It turned out that pain and suffering could be rewritten in the eyes of a child. Everything would gradually become all right again. Their love and hate would slowly become a legend of the cultivation world. Under the locust tree, their stories would slowly be narrated by storytellers one after another. With you and I, a lifetime of ups and downs, life and death, honor and disgrace, the guests 2 or 3 tears, the whole hall cheers. The young girl and the young boy were under the shade of trees as they paid respects to each other. They were childhood friends and they were looking at each other with sweet expressions on their faces as they shouted. First bow to the heavens and earth. Second bow. Under the old locust tree walked a black-clothed cultivator with a pretty face. At his waist was an old faded quiver with no arrows in it. After the calamity ended, the world was peaceful. Inside the quiver embroidered with flowers, there was a little fey wolf curled up with the tip of its golden claws, looking at the outside world with a woo-woo sound. The black-clothed cultivator stood under the tree and watched the 2 children playing house with a lazy smile. Suddenly, she thought of something and walked over, handing the young girl a red handkerchief. Huh? The girl was stunned. What is this? Who are you? The black-clothed cultivator did not answer, but only smiled and said, Why is the wife had a leaf on her head? Come here, this is for you. The handkerchief was old, soft, and of good texture. On the corner of the cloth was embroidered the word "Si." How many years ago was it? It was slightly damaged, as this was when she was crying in fear in the illusionary world. Nangongsi had taken it out to wipe her tears. The young girl took the handkerchief and looked at it. Suddenly, a smile blossomed on her face. She raised her head and said, "Thank you, elder sister." The black-clothed cultivator was startled, and then her eyes began to shine with stars and light. After so many years, there weren't many people who could recognize that she was a woman. Furthermore, there was the voice-changing spell that she would never be able to dispel. This young girl's eyes were truly bright. She smiled and shook her head. She straightened her body and patted the white gold plush head of her arrow bag. "Let's go." "What are you looking at?" "Naobajin, a woo-woo-woo." The wind began to blow and the leaves of the locust tree rustled. The storyteller was talking about the battle at Mount Xiao. At that moment, all of them were crying. She did not cry anymore. She straightened her back and walked alone towards the distant mountains. The sweet voices of a little girl and a little boy sounded behind her. Husband and wife bowed to each other. She just so happened to walk out of the shade of the locust tree at this time. The piercing sunlight brushed against her face, and for some reason, she smiled until her eyes curved. Her heart was filled with joy and sweetness. Childhood was such a wonderful time, she thought. It had been so easy to form an alliance, kneel down and kowtow 9 times. After walking a distance, she suddenly heard loud footsteps. "Big sister. Your handkerchief." She didn't look back but gave a relieved wave of her hand, looking like a hero. Naobajin's eyes were open as it looked at her blankly, as if asking her, "It is something left by Nangongsi, do you not want it?" She laughed, her eyes gentle. "No." As she said this, she looked towards the hazel and unruly grassland, where a myriad of things was born in the spring. Unsurprisingly, she saw the figure of Nangongsi standing beside her, still with his wild and unruly expression. He was a bit arrogant but also a bit calm. She said, "I know you're here." Nangongsi's phantom frowned, as if to reprimand her. She said gently, "Don't be angry. They were kowtowing and lack avail. So I gave them your handkerchief." Nangongsi still did not seem happy. "A handkerchief in exchange for a good marriage, just smile." The sun was shining brightly. Nangongsi forced a smile, but it was even uglier than a grimace. He laughed along with her, his eyelashes drooping. When she raised his eyes again, the shadow of Nangongsi had already disappeared. But she knew he would come back. It wasn't a ghost or an illusion. He was in her heart, so she could always see him. He was always the most handsome when he was in high spirits. In the blink of an eye, it was New Year's Eve of the year. According to the rules of the cultivation world, the mourning period for the parents is finished. Thus, on that very New Year's Eve, Xuemeng's succession ceremony as the new sect leader of Shisheng Peak commenced. On that silver night sky, Xuemengji was talking about ceremonies. He was wearing a jade crown, a sect leader's ring and silk yarn. He was wearing 9 layers of clothes on both the inside and the outside. He stood in the majestic loyalty hall with a jade-like face and a handsome yet mature appearance. If one were to look closely, they would more or less be able to discern the shadow of Zhangxi in that pair of eyes. However, his surname would never be Zhang, and he would never want to be like Zhangxi. "Congratulations, sect leader Xue." Elder Suanji led his disciples to bow first. The disciples who were at Shisheng Peak knelt down in succession, and the guests who had come to congratulate them also lowered their heads in salute. Their voice rumbled like thunder, resounding through the mountain peak that was shrouded in clouds of smoke. "Congratulations, sect leader." The fireworks bloomed brightly in the night sky, as if announcing the beginning of the golden age that belonged to Shisheng Peak, and the darkness of last night would never come back. Xuemeng smiled. His black eyes were very deep and very calm, but they were not very bright. He raised his glass and drank with the others. He would never act the way he used to. He would never make those ridiculous and obnoxious mistakes again. Mei Hangxiu sighed from his seat and closed his eyes, this kid, he is finally going to become Nangong Lu. Be careful. Mei Hangxiu glanced at his brother. I'm not saying that there's something wrong with him. I'm talking about his position today. That's not something you should talk about. The elder brother said coldly. Also, since the beginning of the banquet, 26 girls have come looking for me. Take off your mask, I've had enough. Mei Hangxiu immediately scrunched his face into a frown. After the banquet had ended, because there were too many guests, it was difficult for the people at Shisheng Peak to take care of them all. Thus, they could only arrange for disciples to be divided into groups to receive the corresponding sect leaders, elders, and disciples. Everyone went back drunk, each having their own thoughts. Xuemeng returned to his room. He was not drunk today. Elder Tanlang's awakened wine juice was more effective than anything else. He sat down and somewhat tiredly rubbed his brow, wanting to take off the heavy ornaments on his body. However, after looking at himself in the bronze mirror for a while, he felt that his entire body was covered with pendant and did not know where to pick first. Elder Suanji knocked on the door and came in. Sect leader. Xuemeng looked dispirited. This is the congratulatory gift list from each sect. I forgot to bring it to you. Elder Suanji passed a thick stack of golden red booklets to him. Remember to read it carefully. Think carefully about the proper return gift. Xuemeng felt more and more tired. Got it? Also, sect leader Zhang said that he wants to meet you alone. I won't see him. He had always been at the Shisheng Peak and was the last one to observe the expressions of all the elders. He sighed and said, then I'll deter him in a while. Anything else? Elder Suanji said, no more. Xuemeng actually hoped that he would say that he had something else to say, so it would be best for him to tell him directly. Something like, 2 mysterious guests have suddenly come from outside and want to see you. However, he did not do so. Elder Suanji left, closing the door to the sect leader's bedroom. In that huge room, Xue Ziming stood alone. He stood there for a long time, then he finally walked to the table, lit up the lamp and looked at those thick gift slips. The list of gifts was arranged according to the order of gifts. The wealthy Gai Yuye was naturally in first place and the list was filled with extravagant treasures such as flametto or a spirit whale bead. However, Xuemeng was not in the mood to read too many of these treasures. He quickly flipped through the booklet in an attempt to find the names of Chu Wanning and Mo Ran. Many rogue cultivators would send gifts even if they didn't come. This was an extremely important day in Xuemeng's life. If Mo Ran did not die, if Chu Wanning was still in the cultivation world, then they would have received news of his ascension as the new sect leader. Taxu Palace, Huohuang Pavilion, Wuibei Temple. Page after page. He turned the pages of his personal gifts from rogue cultivators several times over. But no. In the end, Xuemeng leaned back against the cushioned mahogany carved chair, wearily rubbing his brow. No. His Shizun, his. It was as if his cousin had completely disappeared from the cultivation world after the great battle that day. Outside was a jubilant celebration with the sound of fireworks and the sect leader of Shisheng Peak was locking himself up in his room, his eyelashes slowly becoming moist. He really could not accept that Chu Wanning and Mo Ran had kept their relationship from him. He could not get along with them without any grudges, but no matter what, he still cared about them from the bottom of his heart. When they were building the memorial tablets, everyone told him that Mo Ran was already dead, but he was stubborn. He said that he would only accept that someone has died if he saw their corpse. He tried his best to understand them, but he still couldn't get over it. When he thought of the things they had hidden from him, he felt so stifled that he couldn't even breathe. He also knew that because of this reason why Chu Wanning and Mo Ran might never return to the Shisheng Peak, such relationship between a Shizun and his disciple could not be truly accepted. But at least send him a letter. At least tell him they were safe. Xuemeng took a deep breath and raised his hand to cover his trembling eyelids. Suddenly, A faint sigh came from outside the window. Xuemeng froze for a moment, then abruptly stood up and rushed over. Dazzling fireworks rose and fell on his face. He looked left and right, but no one was there. However, there was a long and narrow brocade box hanging from a peach tree outside the window. Xuemeng trembled as he reached out his hand. His entire body tensed up as he opened the embroidered box. At this moment, a firework rose into the air, shattering thousands of stars in the middle of the night. In the sparkling and translucent flowing brilliance, Xuemeng saw a narrow curved blade, which was newly forged. It had a long body and a silver handle. The crystal looked new as it sparkled brilliantly. It was a reforged long cheng. Xuemeng seemed to be in a daze as he held the embroidered box in his arms. He then directly jumped out of the window and rushed to the back garden while shouting, "Shizun!" In the empty and lonely backyard of the sect leader, what responded was the whistling of the wind. He called out frantically, "Shizun! Mo ran! Come out!" The night breeze was cool and damp and cold on his cheeks, and he ran blindly among the flowers, his robes and arms scratched by the branches of the trees. "Come out!" In the end, his voice started to whimper. No one could be found anywhere. Xuemeng stopped his footsteps, slowly lowered his body, and curled up on the ground as he muttered, "Come back." The faint sound of leaves blowing could be heard. Xuemeng shivered as he looked in the direction of the melody. Then he saw them, but those two people had already gone too far and had stopped at the eaves of the sky-reaching pagoda. Behind the solemn corner of the flying beast, two figures that could not have been more familiar in the past leaned against each other. The sleeves of his robe fluttered as he sat on his knees with the holy weapon juga. He was cultivating while leaning against the night clothes. At his fingertips, he held a bamboo leaf and played a song. Under the moonlight, I visit my old friends, both our faces reflecting the red in the lanterns. Once the phoenix sings, the spring dawns, endless rivers and mountains are peaceful. Burying the brewed drink, having no one to drink with. After years of separation, returning to meet brother once again. Why do people need to accompany one another so often in life, when the east wind can carry love? The melodious gookin whistle echoed in the moonlight, drifting towards the vast sky. After the celebratory ending of the song, there was a flash of golden light and Chu Wanning's rising dragon was summoned. The two of them jumped onto the back of the dragon and flew away on the wind. Later on, Xuemeng found two letters with familiar calligraphy in the brocade box. One was from Chu Wanning and the other belonged to Mo Weiyu. Mo Weiyu's letter was very long, telling the various stories that followed, telling him many of his previous secrets and also explaining that because they still did not know what the people thought of them, they were not willing to rashly appear and drag down Shi Sheng Peak. As for this new Longcheng scimitar, it was something that he and Chu Wanning had managed to obtain in the past few months and hoped that it could be of use to him. On the other hand, Chu Wanning's letter was much shorter, and there were a few lines of script on it. Sect leader, Yu Hang felt guilt in his heart, thus he had no face to meet his disciple. The road ahead will be long, so cherish it. The hilt of the saber Longcheng was embedded with a night flower that could accompany the sect leader for a lifetime. In the future, should the sect leader need the thin and weak power of Yu Hang, it would be at his disposal. That night, Xuemeng stared at the word sect leader for a very long time. He did not come back to his senses until late at night, when the wine was all over the place and the silence was complete. Thinking that from now on, he might never hear his Shizun call out his name again and that he would only be called sect leader from there on. He felt that he had never been so tired of the many rules and regulations of this world. But at least Chu Wanning was still there, as was Mo Ran. Perhaps they would be separated by 1,000 li in the future, or perhaps they might not even see each other for several years. However, in the end, they were still able to share a portion of the world's moonlight. At the foot of the mountain, at Vuchame town, two men in hooded cloaks came out of the night and walked to the bustling night market. They found a food stand and sat down. One of them, a tall and slender man, said, "Boss, I want clear soup, thin slices of beef, thin slices of mutton, tripe shutters, crispy meat, fried meat, crystal fish slices, hibiscus prawns." The other person said flatly, "That's more or less enough. We won't be able to eat them all." Then, "How about pine nut mandarin fish and 2 jars of soy milk?" That person pursed his lips then said, "Don't order any more." These were no other than the two who had just given gifts to Xue Meng, Chu Wanning and Mo Weiyu. "Then, we want a serving of sweet osmanthus cake." After Mo Ran finished speaking, he smiled, "Do you know how to do it?" The waiter was very eager. Normally we wouldn't, as this is a dish from the Zhanghuai region. However, Menpo Hall at Shisheng Peak often serve it, so we at the foot of the mountain managed to learn it. "Oh yeah, we have a great hero menu here. Would the two of you like to take a look?" Chu Wanning frowned. "What menu?" "Great hero menu. Don't you two know?" The waiter proudly introduced. "A short while ago, there was a huge disaster in the world. The 2 cultivators who took care of this calamity was from our very own Shisheng Peak. All the restaurants right now offer special dishes which were exactly based on the taste of those 2 cultivators." As he said this, he took out 2 bamboo slips from his waist and enthusiastically handed them over to Chu Wanning and Mo Ran. "What about this?" "It's the menu for Grandmaster Chu." Afraid that they wouldn't understand, the waiter continued to explain with excitement, "It's rumored that Grandmaster Chu likes to slightly burn things when he cooked, so we have some scorched pills, fried potions, and boiled vegetables with burnt tofu." "Oh, right, this squirrel fish would also cook with quite a bit of burn in it." Chu Wanning. To suppress his laughter, Mo Ran poured himself a cup of tea and drank it. However, as he flipped through another bamboo slip, he found the Grandmaster Mo menu and the tea in his mouth nearly burst out. Cough, cough, cough. The waiter was a little panicked. Esteemed guest, what happened to you? Are you all right?" I'm fine, I'm fine." Cough cough. Mo Ran pointed at the bamboo scroll and asked, "What are you people doing? Why would Grandmaster Mo's menu have something like Haitang sweet soup on it? I've never even heard of it." "According to stories, Grandmaster Mo likes sweet things." Mo Ran. "He also likes Haitang blossoms." The waiter was like the all-knowing scholar of the cultivation world as he explained, "So our lady boss created this Haitang sweet soup by herself. The sugar on this dish is 30% more than what you would normally get for dessert, so it's bound to be so sweet that your tongue will go numb. Can you still eat that?" The waiter smiled and said, "Why can't I eat? It sells very well. Would it be better for the 2 guests to have a serving of Grandmaster Mo and Grandmaster Chu's menu? Try it and you won't lose out. I'm sure you will both enjoy them." Chu Wanning felt a headache coming on. "No. I don't like it, thank you." Mo Ran smiled and said, "Actually, I don't like eating sweet foods that much." Sigh, what a pity. The waiter scratched his head regretfully. He seemed to really admire the new dishes in the restaurant. He could even hear the mutterings from afar, "They are the favorite dishes of the world's heroes, it's good to have a taste of it." Chu Wanning. Mo Ran. What are you laughing for? Chu Wanning glanced at him. Is it that funny? No. I'm just happy. If I'm happy, I can smile even for a small matter. He turned his head to look at the bustling crowd on the street. After the storm had subsided, the world seemed to be alive again, the women picking up small jewelry and buying New Year's Eve red paper wares, the men drinking and chatting in front of the bright nightstands, the lantern light shining on their leisurely faces, the atmosphere warm, even the grease on their cheeks was not so irritating. A group of children ran over, screaming and laughing. No one knew what kind of game they were playing. One child was wearing a mask, the other group running like rabbits in front of him, constantly shouting, "Don't let him catch you! Ha ha ha, don't let him catch you!" Moran held his chin in his hand, a gesture which made him look very handsome with even a hint of loveliness in it. He suddenly sighed with satisfaction. This is great. As he spoke, he raised his head to look at the bright lights on Shisheng Peak and then he repeated, this is great. Chu Wanning said. Not too good. You've just heard how Xuemeng was calling us. As expected, Moran was silent for a moment, but he still smiled, but if we really do stay, he will be troubled again. I know, Chu Wanning replied. As the dishes were served, Moran continued to eat while muttering, in the end, Xuemeng is still somewhat childish. Actually, it's for the best right now. If we go back to Shisheng Peak, trouble will follow. Furthermore, he might tolerate me for 1 or 2 days. In another month or 2 months, we don't know. Chu Wanning bit off a piece of peanut, making Moran feel wronged. He'll throw me out. Chu Wanning suppressed his laughter as he knocked on his head with the chopsticks on his back. You are the one who is childish. Really? When the time comes for him to chase me away, I wouldn't be able to avoid him. The sect leader's order, I'm scared to death. Chu Wanning couldn't hold it in anymore, he laughed lightly, don't mess around. Why would he chase you away? It's clear that we don't want to stay, so don't leave this to him. Fine. Moran scratched his head and grinned. He then deeply said, Benefactor Gage, whatever you say is correct. Chu Wanning said, let's eat. We'll go home after dinner. They were now hiding in the depths of the Nanping Mountains. The two had lived there ever since Moran had returned to his body. He was not deliberately hiding from the world. He merely felt that the world had walked halfway through and that it just so happened that he would pass by this place. Thus, he decided to rest in that paradise. Everything was just right. After picking up a piece of meat, Moran's eyes curved into a smile as he said, actually, I was in the wrong. I really don't want to go back. You're afraid he'll blame you? No. Moran smiled and rubbed his nose. I'm afraid that he will call me mistress. Chu Wanning. Moran's eyes were very gentle, pitch black and slightly purple as their luster flowed, but the purple seemed very good-natured now. He sighed and said, a generation has passed. Eat. Moran obediently lowered his head to eat. He behaved as if 2 fluffy dog ears had emerged from his head and hung down in a soft and tame manner. However, Chu Wanning was clear that it was not that he did not want to return to the Shisheng Peak. Actually, he, himself, Xuemeng, and the others all wanted to reunite, but the timing was not right. Sometimes, those ignorant, frivolous years would pass, but no one could force them to come back. All of them understood this logic. It was only because Moran feared that he would suffer, that he would take full responsibility and tried to make him laugh. Speaking of which, I've never asked you about it properly. On the day of the disaster, how did you know you'll be able to come back? After thinking for a while, he said. Would you blame me if I told you the truth? Chu Wanning looked at him with his bright eyes, what do you think? Moran rubbed the back of his neck and laughed with his head lowered. Actually, after the Devil Realm's gate opened, I also felt a kind of spiritual energy flowing through my body. However, back then, I was still the Taxian Jun that was under-controlled. I felt dizzy and I didn't think too much about it. Yes. At the last moment, when it was about to disappear, I suddenly remembered something. At that time, I was speculating that maybe I'm the same as Song Xingye, who was a special kind of butterfly-boned beauty feast. Moran said, according to the history books, as long as the demon's body isn't broken, their soul is complete. Wouldn't it be easy to be reborn then? So I thought. If I am, then as long as I insist on returning to my body, I should be able to come back to life. Chu Wanning slightly frowned. Before this, I had always thought that a demon's soul being able to return to its own body was a legend. He paused and then asked, Then why didn't Song Kayutong come back to life? Mo Ran said helplessly, even if a demon wants to revive, the desire to live must be very strong. That feeling. Well, it's like falling off a cliff and being thrown a rope as a lifeline. The rope was covered with oil. If he wasn't careful, he would fall into the abyss. I have to hold on tight to the rope and climb up, not letting go for a moment, before I can return to my body. Wanning, I've been thinking about coming back to you. Mo Ran raised his eyes and looked at him, that's why I managed to come back. The lantern above his head swayed, Chu Wanning looked into his pitch-black eyes, and felt as if his chest was extremely soft. He still wasn't used to this feeling of tenderness, so he quickly turned his face away. Actually, there is another very important reason. This butterfly-boned beauty feast is a half-demon. This method of rebirth will not work on us before the gate to the demon realm was opened. Mo Ran said, it was because I have absorbed the demonic energy and gained the strength, or else we would still be human beings. Furthermore, the heart of my body has already been destroyed. After receiving the demonic energy, I felt that the power contained in it was much stronger than that of a spiritual core. That's why I thought that I might be able to use it to reverse the situation. That's why when you let me go, you were not sure if you could be reborn. Mo Ran looked at the other man's slightly narrowed eyes and realized that he had said the wrong thing. He could not help but panic as he lightly coughed to change the topic. This fish is not bad. Chu Wanning would never fall for his trick and stared at him. If you didn't come back, what I would have seen when I got to Nanping Mountains would have been an ice-cold corpse. Mo Ran couldn't take it anymore. He lowered his head, bit his lips, and was silent for a moment. Then, he raised his head and said, that's right. I can't bear to see you die. Whether I am alive or not. Seeing that Chu Wanning's eyes were slightly red, it seemed as if he was in pain but also wanted to get angry. Mo Ran stretched out his 5 fingers and held his hand on the table, rubbing it in his palm. Under the lamplight, he said in a slightly hoarse voice, I know that I might have lied to you, but even if you hate me and blame me for it, I can't just sit by and watch you die. As he spoke, he suddenly closed his eyes, his eyelashes trembling. I've seen enough of it for 2 lifetimes. Chu Wanning's tensed back gradually eased and his clenched knuckles gradually lost their strength. However, his eyes were still red and moist. Steam rose from the pot, and tiny bubbles of soup bubbled in the pot. In this hard-to-come-by world of fireworks, Mo Ran was holding Chu Wanning's hand, interlacing their fingers. He said, I thought, if I really lost the bet, I can wait for you. 10 years, or even tens of years. If you become immortal, then even hundreds, or even thousands, of years would suffice. The human world is very good. Wanning, I don't want you to die with me. Suddenly, a boiling bubble burst within the pot. Some boiling water splashed onto Chu Wanning's wrist. Of course, these sparks of hot water didn't hurt, but he reflexively retracted his hand and lowered his head. After bowing his head, he felt that he should be more at ease. Thus, he mustered up the courage to raise his head and glared at that renegade disciple who did not know what was good for him. Mo Ran was amused by his actions. What's wrong? Sometimes staring at me, sometimes staring at the table. Chu Wanning wanted to say something, but at this time, the bell at the sky-reaching pagoda chimed. It floated down from the mountain peak and echoed throughout the bustling night market. Crap. After some time, Chu Wanning's expression slightly changed. Time passed. He suddenly stared at the man sitting in front of him. Seeing that the man who had been smiling earlier had suddenly closed his eyes, he became anxious. Ever since Mo Ran had been revived, once every 3 days until the night of the next day, Taxian Jun's consciousness would take over this body. The reason for this was probably because the soul of Taxian Jun had been separated from the other souls for a long time. It was difficult for the consciousness to merge with the soul, so even if the soul had already fused, It could still change its personality. Sure enough, a moment later, when Mo Ran opened his eyes again, the radiance in those eyes had already changed. The Emperor Taxian Jun slowly raised his handsome face. It was obvious that he was the same person, the same body, but there was still a bit less righteousness in his expression. Taxian Jun's mouth opened and closed. He laughed arrogantly and said, After not seeing this venerable one for 3 days, did you miss this venerable one? He lowered his head and looked at the dishes in front of him, as well as the pot that was half eaten. Finally, the picky gaze of the previous emperor of the mortal realm fell upon the dilapidated wooden chairs on the street and the oily dining table, which was obviously very cramped. Those items that were common to Grand Master Mo. To him. Waiter. Get the hell over here. Mo Ran, sit down. All of a sudden, it alarmed the surrounding customers. They all turned around, and someone exclaimed, "Ah! Is that Grand Master Chu?" Eh? It seemed as though Grand Master Mo and Grand Master Chu were here as well. Wasn't he dead? Who can rub my eyes? I'm not blind, right? You're not blind, I saw it too. A little girl screamed, "Ah! It's really Grand Master Mo." The commotion attracted the attention of passers-by. More and more gazes fell on them. Some of them even recognized them. Chu Wanning pulled over the table with a dark face, still shouting, "The table is so shabby, how can we eat? Are you sure you're not mistaken?" While there were still less people rushing over, Taxian Jun called out his sword and flew on it in panic. Only when they were high up in the sky did Chu Wanning finally heave a sigh of relief. The moon was bright and clear and he had survived a disaster. Everything was going well, if it weren't for the fact that Taxian Jun was still behind him grumbling angrily, asking unhappily, "What's so good about Grand Master Mo? A bunch of troublesome commoners. Why do they only remember Grand Master Mo? The one who upheld the Black Tortoise armor formation was me. I'm the one who saved their lives. I was the one who stopped the flood." Chu Wanning glanced at the man who was gritting his teeth in anger. Suddenly, he felt that he was really petty, even to the point of being jealous of himself. "What are you looking at?" When he suddenly saw Chu Wanning's smiling gaze, he was stunned for a moment. Then, he narrowed his eyes in annoyance and pretended not to care. "Even you? You are also mine." The slap caught Chu Wanning off guard and he shouted angrily, "Don't move." Indeed, the sword beneath his feet swayed slightly, but he was quickly stabilized by Taxian Jun's demonic chi with just a casual wave of his finger. Taxian Jun covered him up in his black gold cloak and snorted unhappily, "What are you afraid of? If I am here, how could I allow you fall to your death?" As he spoke, he activated the sword flight technique. In the moonlight, the sword shadow was like a black whirlwind, flying towards the Nanping mountain. Deep in the night, they were just like an ordinary couple. They went home. Later on, people would occasionally see the figures of Grand Master Mo and Grand Master Chu in the cultivation world, on the rivers and lakes, but they came and went without traces, leaving only a glimpse. Later on, there was another rumor spreading through the cultivation world. Legend has it that there was a blind doctor that traveled through the northern part of the Jiangnan desert. He always wore a bamboo hat and a veil. No one had ever seen his true appearance. The only thing they knew was that the blind man had extraordinary medical skills. He had trekked to the ends of the earth, helping to cure over tens of thousands of people without taking a single cent from them. The most famous story about the doctor was this: there was once a group of teenagers in the town who were kidnapped by cultivators when they were young. They were scalded to the point that they turned into human-shaped bears, which are very difficult to cure. The doctor who was practicing medicine came to this place and heard about this. He actually used the skin on his wrist as a medicinal guide to cut off the flesh in exchange for the healthy young men. The people in the town were filled with gratitude as they asked for his name. The doctor had said that he was only a sinner. After many years, the great battle that year had become a series of old and yellowed books and plays, to the point where the children of the past had all been drawn. The young people of the past were mostly married and the heroes of the past had already grown white hair. Another year passed. At Shisheng Peak, the sect leader, Shizun, took in a rogue child as his direct disciple and treated him as his own. This little fellow was naturally familiar with everyone and he was completely unafraid in front of the infamous sect leader Shui. He kept pestering Shizun with questions all day. One day, the little boy came over and asked him out of curiosity, "Shizun, I heard a lot about the past when everyone was talking about Shizu and Shishu. Are they still in contact with Shizun?" At that time, the sect leader, Shizun, stood by the window and looked out at the blossoming peach blossoms. He said calmly, "Occasionally." The little boy was quite eager. "Then why didn't you invite them back? The rooms of the Red Lotus Pavilion and Shishu's are both empty. No one else has ever stayed there." The young disciple pulled on Shizun's wide sleeve. "Honored Shizun, call them back. I've heard enough stories about them a few times already. It's said that Shizu and Shishu are great heroes that are hard to come by." Shizun turned his light brown eyes and looked at the little boy in the spring sunshine with a little smile. "Do you also want to be a hero in the future?" "Of course." The little disciple puffed up his cheeks, looking full of ambition. "Shizun, how can you have a useless disciple? I want to do something great." "A promising future doesn't necessarily mean you have to accomplish great things." Shizun said, "If you can live a proper life, you won't bully the weak, won't bow to the strong, won't dishonor yourself in spite of circumstances and won't be discouraged by adversity. Also, be careful and reserve judgment of a person or a matter, and be compassionate. When you reach the age of 18, you will be a great hero who will stand at the top of the world if you can honestly say that you have a clear conscience." "What's wrong?" The little boy was still young, after all. When Shizun turned around, he found that the little boy was already yawning. Seeing his Shizun staring at him, he forced himself to stop yawning. The corner of his eyes were wet with tears, but he still tried to straighten his back, as if deep in thought, and nodded his head. He looked just like a young phoenix like him when he was young. Shizun held back his laughter and pretended to be serious as he asked, "Did you remember what I have just said?" He quickly said, "I'll remember." Shizun asked again, "Do you understand them?" "I listen." "I don't understand." After a while, he said in an aggrieved tone, "Shizun, you're talking too much." Shizun did not reprimand him. After thinking for a while, he lifted his hand and patted Chen Changshen's head. "Forget it. It's really too much. Heh. If you want to be a hero, then remember one thing." The little disciple hurriedly straightened his back and listened attentively. He probably thought that Shizun wanted to tell him some particularly powerful technique or some profound words. His clearly defined black and white eyes were wide open. The sunlight flowed onto Shizun's face. As the shadows of the flowers flowed, Shizun smiled. "Don't make wild assumptions at others. This is the highest dignity a man can bestow upon himself." Then he bent down and picked up the confused little fellow and led him out of the house and to the end of the garden. From here, the peak of the mountain towered, and the Red Lotus Pavilion was hidden in the clouds. Through the floating clouds on the ground, one could see from afar the flourishing towns and rivers at the foot of the mountain. With the wind blowing, the young disciple's fatigue completely disappeared and he stopped yawning. After all, he was still so young and childish. A flower and a bird could easily win him over. Shizun stood next to him by the carving fence. They gazed at the scenery for a while before asking, "What do you see?" The little guy did not understand. "The house. Water. And fog." Shizun smiled as he listened. His personality was getting more and more amiable, easily angering him seemed to be a distant matter. What the child saw were houses and what he saw was the rise and fall of the Vuchame town. From the once shabby town to the now bustling town, it was much more lively than in the former cultivation world. What the child saw was water. He saw rolling yellow river. Sometimes, he even thought that a monk was standing by the river with a soul-calling lantern in his hand as he solemnly said, "Benefactor Shui, let's go to the underworld." What the child saw was mist, and what he saw was the scattered souls of life, floating around on Shisheng Peak all year round. His father and mother were among them, and later he would always see them, on the Mountain of Daggers and Sea of Flames field, in the back garden, in Menpo Hall, on the Nahi Bridge, even when he closed his eyes. In fact, other than the 3 souls and 7 spirits, there was probably another kind of soul. That kind of soul was only born in the hearts of loved ones. When you thought about them, they would come to your side. Xuemeng held his little disciple in his arms, staring at the distant Skyfrost Hall in the mountain. Many of his family and friends had once stayed in this place. Speaking of which, last year, the elder in charge of discipline had grown older and died in a snowstorm in early spring. Elder Suanji had also left 2 years ago. Everyone said that he had done too many good deeds. If Yan Luo had called him out earlier, then he might have been able to decompose his corpse and become an immortal. Xuemeng, one after the other, saw the deaths of these elders from their initial hysteria to their later peace or perhaps helplessness. When Xuemeng had finally able to leisurely sort out Elder Suanji's funeral, he would also reminisce about his past self. But this was only a memory of his past. He would no longer be addicted to the past, unable to extricate himself. He was the leader of the sect and also a disciple of Elder Yuheng. He had to keep a close eye on the situation. Shizun. A small tender hand was shaking in front of him, bringing Xuemeng's consciousness back. What is Shizun thinking? Xuemeng smiled and said, "I was just thinking about the past." At the mention of the past, the little fellow became a little excited and tried to continue on with the previous topic, Shizun and Shishu. Actually, they come back every New Year's Eve. This year, you will be able to see them. The little guy curled his lips, a little unsatisfied. But why is it New Year's Eve only? Why didn't they stay? I heard that Shishu is extremely formidable, so when he slashed out. Xuemeng lifted his hand and poked his head. Your head would fall off. The little disciple stuck out his tongue, but he wasn't afraid. Xuemeng seemed very serious. Really? Your Shishu is a bit, after all, has a split personality. Eh? Split personality. Xuemeng nodded. I'll bring you to see him this New Year's Eve. However, you will only be able to stay until the time is right. After the time is over, you must leave. Why? The child's eyes widened in curiosity. Xuemeng said. Unless you want to call him your majesty. Ah. Even more confused, the little disciple who had just been informed blinked his eyes. He wanted to ask again. Xuemeng was like thinking about something that he couldn't recall. He simply put him down and rubbed his eyebrows. He probably had a terrible headache. I haven't seen Shizun's distress since the beginning of my training. The little fellow can't help but be more interested in the legendary Shishu who has a split personality and pursued Xuemeng to ask directly, Shizun, 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 he dash. Don't ask. Shizun, he. Don't ask. Shizu and Shishu. Go back and copy books. Wow, Shizun, you are so fierce. In the clear sky of Shu, the pure sunshine falls on the Shizun and disciple pair through the branches. The wind blows through Xuemeng's clothes, over the young apprentice's young cheeks, over the magnificent Shisheng Peak, over the green grass in front of the hero's grave. The wind blows across the Wanli River and mountains for 1 day and 1 night. It brushes past the blind who can help the world by hanging pots, the brothers who appreciate plums on the snowy plains, the girl who drink by the Dragon Soul Pool in Mount Qiao, and the relatives who return to seclusion in Nanping Valley. Wherever they go, the rivers and mountains are still there, and the Han River is clear. The fate of countless people is intertwined with each other. Although they can't stop at a banquet to rejoice with wine, have a good dream and never wake up, there will always be fragments left by relatives, close friends, and loved ones in a person, whether they are alive or dead, whether they have left or not, and these fragments will always follow us like a shadow. With a clear wind, the hatang trees in front of sky-reaching pagoda are blooming brilliantly, which is no different from yesterday. The long night has passed, the horizon has its own destiny, and now everything is peaceful. Xuemeng looked up at the same towering majestic pagoda. He seemed to recall something, laughed and took his apprentice's hand and went to the loyalty hall, the largest hall in the sect. At this moment, it seemed as if he had heard the melody of the Shizun and disciples singing leisurely on the sky-reaching pagoda when he had took over the sect leader position many years ago. The melody went through the long river of years, and now it blows away like snow behind today's sect leader Shui. Under the moonlight, I visit my old friends, both our faces reflecting the red in the lanterns. Once the phoenix sings, the spring dawns, endless rivers and mountains are peaceful. Burying the brewed drink, having no one to drink with. After years of separation, returning to meet brother once again. Why do people need to accompany one another so often in life, when the east wind can carry love? End chapter.